Stuffing, dressing, what do you call it? In our house, it can be either. If you call it stuffing, usually it's stuffed in the bird or meat, whatever. And if it's dressing, it's on the side. It's interchangeable, same thing, same difference. Remember though, if you're doing it in the bird, you need to cook the bird longer because that dressing, that stuffing needs to be cooked properly. Today, I am doing cornbread dressing, and I'm going to show you what to do. I'm not going to give you the proportions. You can watch this and get an idea, but we're going to start off, excuse me, there's the Jiffy cornbread getting ready to come out of the oven. Yeah, I think we'll give it a couple more minutes. We'll give it 2 more minutes. All right, so I've got Jiffy cornbread, and I always like my Jiffy muffin mix. So I've got one of those. You just follow the instructions, the same instructions as on the box. I just put olive oil in here, and I'm going to use about 1.5 cups of onions. Now I've got red and white onion. It doesn't make any difference what you use on this. Now, my mother used to make oyster dressing, oyster stuffing, and she also used to make cornbread. And so I was used to having multiples. The people in my house go more for vegetables and less on the stuffing, but I feel like we have to have some stuffing. Over here in this pot, I've got some giblets going, and they're gonna boil, and we're gonna use not only the liquid for some of the dressing, stuffing, we are also going to use it for the gravy later. Now I'm getting a head start on everything because I don't want to have to do this when company is here. What I will do is I will get this to temperature and then cool it down, and then I will freeze this casserole. It will be wonderful reheated, so it's not a problem. You can do this a couple days ahead of time and not have to rush, which is what I'm doing. So I'm going to go ahead and sweat these onions a little bit. I'll be right back. So those onions sweated for about 4 minutes. So they're not translucent yet, but that's okay, because what we're going to do now is add the other part of the trinity. We have 2 cups of chopped celery, and just chop like that, and also 1 green bell pepper, and that's going to go right in there. So we've got our trinity. Now, when I was a kid, we would watch Mom, and this recipe, as I said, my mom wasn't much of a cook, but this recipe was one of my aunts. And so we would watch Mom. As I grew up, Mom would go, okay, you guys go do it. So I would wind up having to do the dressing a lot. And my favorite, of course, is oyster. And unfortunately, nobody else likes it except me. And so I'm not doing it this year. But that's okay. Now the giblets are going. You can see they get foamy. That's okay. That's not an issue. You just got to watch and make sure they don't boil over. Now in an earlier video, I made fresh homemade breadcrumbs, which is perfect. I'm going to use a little bit of garlic. That's going to go in there. But remember my tip on garlic. The garlic should always go in a little bit later. The other thing is I will break up the cornbread, and then we'll put that in there. And I've got a couple eggs. So we've got a few more things to do. Of course, we're going to use some stock, which I'll take off of the giblets. So let's get this cooked. I'll be back probably in about 4 minutes. We're back. We're going to go ahead and add the garlic right now and let that cook just a tiny bit. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, we are going to take this cornbread and we are going to crumble it up. And you can see I used one of the silicone pans, and basically you don't even have to spray that. It'll fall right out. So less waste, not putting any extra calories in there. You've got it. So that's going to cook a little bit more. So we're about 8 to 10 minutes into cooking these vegetables here. And we'll give that a good crumble. And we'll just let it sit here for a second. So you can see I let it cool off enough to where I can handle it. And we're gonna give this a stir, and I'll be back. So the vegetables have cooked about another 3 minutes, and they're softening up, and they will soften even a little bit more during the reheating and the baking, but we've still got a little bit of texture in there. So let's go ahead and move on. I have greased a pan here, a baking dish, a square one, and I'm going to now food process my giblets. I'm going to use 3, and so we're going to go ahead and get that done. And my family doesn't like a lot of it, so we are going to make sure that we don't overpower it. The rest of it I'll use for dirty rice or something along those lines rather. So I'm going to go ahead and get this out, and this just adds that extra layer of flavor. Since it is a cornbread dressing and not an oyster dressing, you need that little bit of extra flavor in it. And like I said, we only use 3. Be sure when you buy a container of giblets like that, you don't use the heart muscle. So I don't want that. I do not want that in my dressing. So anyway, we've got that. We'll stir that in here. Now the fire is still on, starting to stick at the bottom, a little bit of the fond. I've also removed about 2 cups, or a little bit under 2 cups, and I've skimmed off the foam that comes with the giblets. So got this going. We're gonna go ahead and add that box of pre-made cornbread right into that. There we go. And we'll stir that, we'll fold that in. Perfect. And here's where we're going to stop it, because we're gonna go ahead and put 2 to 3 eggs in. So I'll be right back. We're back. We're gonna add a little bit of liquid right now to this, just a little bit, and we're still gonna fold it. We don't wanna smush it up. We wanna fold it in. There's a big chunk. Okay, we're gonna add the eggs a little bit at a time and stir that in. That was 1. And here's the second. Get that all stirred in. That adds richness to the mixture. There we go. Get that all stirred in. Beautiful, beautiful. Make sure it doesn't scramble. Now we're going to add breadcrumb, probably about 3/4 of a cup. Let's go ahead and add some more Italian seasoning. There we go. Perfect. All right. We're going to start off by adding a 1/2 stick of butter right here. Let that melt. While that's melting, I'm going to run to my pantry real quick and grab the thyme, which I should have had out. So let me do that. Here we go. Thyme's going in. All right. Give that a stir. The smell reminds me of the old day Thanksgivings. Here we go. Get that butter all ingrained in there. We're going to go with a little bit more butter. We're going to put another 1/2 stick in there. You don't want it to be too dry. So if you freeze it and it is too dry, you can pop a little bit of butter on top and make sure it's covered for the first part of the time that you're baking it, and then take it out so it'll brown at the end. So now, since I'm using real stock, and that was another 1/2 stick of butter, since I'm using real stock, there's no salt. So I am going to go ahead and add salt, and I am going to add pepper. Salt, and here we go with the pepper in a second. And we're almost done. You see how easy that was to put together. Beautiful. We're going to add a little more stock to this. Now, some people would add a bay leaf about right now. I don't want to add a bay leaf. I think it'll be perfect the way it is. Okay. Let's give this a little taste to see how our seasoning is. It's good. Maybe a little more salt. A little bit more salt, and I think we'll use the rest of that 2 cups of stock. Delicious. Perfect, full of flavor, and just right for either stuffing the bird or using it as a dressing. Let me bring a spoonful of it over. Now, remember, we're going to reheat it in the oven at 350 covered. Can you see this? 350 degrees covered. You know, take it out and thaw it out first. But 350 degrees covered for about 30 minutes. Then take off the top and then brown the top just a bit, and I think you're good to go. So I hope you try it. It was easy, just got to put it all together, and have a wonderful Thanksgiving.